Hello, once again, my dear friends. It is once again I, the Church Warden, aka Wood Wonka, coming to you live from the Lily Pad here at the epicenter of the multiverse on Homebrew Roleplay. Putting some, well, putting some information in your face, putting my face in your face, putting our face in your face, putting the face in the face and the thing. This is getting kind of weird. Anyway, I apologize for missing last week. We're back on track now. Thank you for joining us if you are, and thank you for checking it out after the fact if you're not. Um, Today we're going to be getting into an interesting topic, one that I think is very important, both as a player and a game master, and that is the emotional content of your game and or story. Now we've covered on the previous iterations, we've covered how to bring your environment to life and make it a character. We've covered the background and history, the philosophy, the stories, the intellectual bringing to life of all of these elements. But we've missed out on the heart of it all. And that's really what I want to get into. So before we dive completely in, I do want to turn your attention to our cover art this evening. This is courtesy of Slug Bunny, available on the Society 6 website. Beautiful piece, available in all kinds of different medium. Please be sure to purchase and send me some. Anyway, without much further ado, when I say getting into the emotional content of a thing, what I'm really talking about is actively bringing it to life. When you hear somebody tell a story about a story or a character that's moved them in some way, what they're going to tell you about 9 times out of 10 is something tragic, something inspiring, or something frustrating. So you have this comedy, tragedy, and conflict. So through these 3 very powerful tools, you create an emotional response. And keep in mind, what I'm talking about right now applies to both the player character as it does the game master. I mean, the author of this story is either of these in this particular case, always, in fact. So when you're creating your character or interacting with your players' characters as a game master, this is why we ask generally that you write a backstory, because this gives us a launch pad for ideas. We get to know who this person is, who they were, what made them who they are. And in doing so, it allows us to find crevices within that story in which we can pull at to garner an emotional response from that character. You know, and just a very simple example of this is, say your character lost somebody important to them, a parent, a brother, a sister, could be anything, but this is an immediate trigger for that character. Now, I do want to preface this with a disclaimer that when you delve into these emotional responses, when you try to get these emotional responses, please, on either side of the DM screen, be respectful and be aware of the reactions that you get. Pay attention to your players, your fellow players, your DM. As a DM, make sure you pay attention to all of it. It is your responsibility as a friend and a cohort in the game to make sure that this isn't going too far for somebody. The end goal of the game is fun. And if this causes somebody to not have fun, it's gone too far. So please keep that in mind. But at the same time, this is a really tremendous way to make an event memorable, to create something that your players will talk about, for a long time to come. And when you create one of those moments, you have succeeded on such a unique and powerful level, because you have not only impacted your game, you've not only impacted that character and the rest of the players, you've impacted the person on some level. And generally, it's a very positive thing for that exact reason. And that's really one of the beautiful things about why we do this, because it brings people out of their shells. It lets people expound on who they are and explore avenues of thought and emotion that they may not be brave enough or willing to do in their real lives. And it's a great way to help people break out of their shells and to grow. It's a beautiful thing when it happens. So, to get these emotional responses, there's obviously a lot of um, tricks that authors use. There's tried and true methods. The most common, of course, of these is loss. Tragedy is probably the easiest emotional state to invoke. Um, a very wise musician friend of mine once said, it's easy to write sad songs. That's why there's so many, because you want to get that out. Whereas when you're feeling good, you want to keep it in. So that's why this is easier. Tragedy is something everyone can relate to on some level. And so it's really easy to manipulate that emotional stat through storytelling. Um, it can involve loss of life. It can involve loss of relationship. It can involve loss of material wealth. I mean, loss in general. And in order to make this truly effective, there has to be some reason why this loss will invoke that tragedy to begin with. And therein lies the challenge as a good storyteller. And this just takes time, generally. No one's going to dive in, meet a character, and immediately fall in love with them. This takes time to truly do. Multiple sessions, usually. Um, I'm going to pull from recent examples here with the Homebrew RP crew, uh, just for sake of loyalty and because it's still fresh on my mind for the most part. But um, our previous campaign with the Stapleton investigative team, very early on, they stumbled across a lost little girl deep down in a mine who was playing with dead things named Phoebe. Phoebe, Phoebe turned out to be a lot of things, but you know, in some strange way, I always felt like she kind of wheedled her way into the hearts of the players on some levels, some more than others, obviously. There was probably still a couple that were just kind of freaked out by her. But whenever Phoebe got into danger or her fate was unknown, or at the very end of the campaign when everything was up in the air, there was a great deal of concern, like notable concern for this character. And death to the yeah, I knew you were one of the ones, Chance, that was probably not such a big fan of Dear Phoebe. But it did invoke an emotional response. I think when she was put into danger, when her story revealed itself as the long lost daughter of the Shanakesian queen, and how she played into the party and rose to the occasion during the very end and stood by the group. It really built this bond over the course of that time. And when that bond was threatened to be severed by loss, I really paid attention. And once again, I'm going to point out this is something you really need to do, is pay attention to your players. I know a lot of us are doing this virtually now. Webcams really, really make this easier on everyone, because words and inflection will get you so far, but face expressions and body language sell it. They really make the difference. The crinkled brow, the frown, the the excited movements of the hands and arms, the inability to sit still. Like, these are bits of body language that you can read as both a game master and a player, to really help let you know that you're garnering the desired effect with your players. And when you get that, it allows you to navigate that story that much better. And that's what we're doing here. Phoebe was a good example. Stapleton, at the very end, sacrificing himself so that Jimmy the Mouth could go through the portal to salvation, garnered an emotional response. And once again, we're talking about loss, kind of particularly here. Of course, we lost the character played by our dear friend Almond's Choice in that same session at the end there. She made the choice to stay, which she played tremendously well. She was faced with something that was pulled directly from her character's backstory. A son that she had thought had been lost came through the portal and offered her a chance at salvation from the impending cataclysm that was raining down around them. And she played it so much to, close to home, that the emotional response that she got actually threw me for a loop. I thought for sure she'd take it. She didn't. She couldn't trust it. It had been too much time. Like, she worked out the whole emotional process in her mind, and you could see it in her face that this was tormenting, not in a truly negative sense. Like, it was an enjoyable part of the story still, but it was a difficult and it was a hard choice to make, because she did what every game master really hopes their players do and stuck to her character and what her character believed and knew, rather than taking the easy way out. And that emotional moment rippled through the entire party. We all still talk about the character in character, with the continuation with the Sigil Confidential, the survivors of that cataclysm. She's still held in high regard, considering one of the lost, the fallen, and it's so great to see, because that bit of storytelling has allowed us this foundational unifying principle on an emotional level amongst our survivors that brings them together. They have this common thread now. They've survived a cataclysm. They've endured tremendous loss, not only of friend and ally, but of the world they once knew. And sometimes I can just picture them in my head, and this is probably just me being a weirdo, but I just picture them like having these moments where they meet and actively might give one another a hug, whereas before, everyone was always very standoffish before it got to that point, especially in the beginning. They were all so vastly different. You had the Eladrin, who was completely aloft from the rest of the group. You had, well, Jimmy Snapcrack in the beginning, who went off on his own way and was replaced by Kong, the monkey shifter monk, very carefree and off on his own. We had Almond's character, the druid. No, wait. The rogue bard. Excuse me. My goodness. Drink another one, right? The bard, Maury Wickleton. There we go. I was getting it mixed up with another campaign. We have a lot going on, which is probably a good segue for a shameless plug that if you're out there watching, you should definitely come join us on Discord and dive into some gaming with us. But as I said, tragedy is probably the easiest emotional response to garner. Loss is easy. It's very easy to craft into a narrative, and it's something that everyone can already, on some level, relate to. So it's very easy. Joy is a bit harder, as I mentioned earlier. It takes a little bit more to really twist joy into a story. Now, there's many levels of joy, obviously. And I really love this. It's a post that's going around of this young girl managing a kickflip on a skateboard, and she just gets so excited that it warms your heart. and it's a level of joy that you don't see very often except when you're young, and it's a beautiful thing. That's really hard to write. It's really hard to inspire that level of response in a player. Um, that's a very difficult trigger to find. Joy is much easier to come by in the realm of reward being the easiest. If you know this player or this character wants this certain thing or achievement, you know, you kind of build them up, let them work towards it, make it a bit of a struggle, and then, you know, if they succeed, they get this thing, they worked hard for it, and they have it, and there's the joy of reward right there. That's a very easy one, and when I say easy, I do not mean in any way less relevant because of that. Just one of the easier ones to craft into your story. Um, One of the ones I really enjoy pushing out there is comedy. A degree of comedy is probably going to exist in almost every tabletop session unless you guys are just super serious. Um, I know every game I think I've ever played has had a degree of laughter and jest, and it's part of the camaraderie of it all. Everything from extreme horror of Call of Cthulhu on down the road to Toon, the cartoon role playing game. Um, and I would actually really strongly recommend that you never neglect this. Don't let it overpower your game. Obviously, don't let it get out of hand, but always encourage a bit of brevity because it'll make or break the game. Um, a lot of times your characters will bring that in. Now I'm going to use Chance as an example again with Kong, the shifter monk, who is constantly getting into shenanigans and getting himself into and out of trouble, constantly cracking jokes and playing with toys. He's got a lot of interesting props that his character has acquired over time. Yes, the Barriar secretary was a little tougher than you expected, but you know, you still got your special bag of throwable substances, and you've still got your Chucky, your lovely friend and companion, and between your hijinks and these props, Kong is a very big source of comedy, and the way that he approaches things with an almost childlike sense of innocence with an intermingling of a much more aware and adult uh, background. Like you just know he's smirking underneath the silly questions. That you just know kind of that Kong's probably a lot smarter than he lets on. And it's one of those things that makes it enjoyable. Just like the fight that he mentioned with the Barriar secretary, you know, I managed to, and we're that realm of sigil that we're playing in currently with the Sigil Confidential opens up the possibility for just about anything because it takes place in the epicenter of the entire multiverse. All of creation centers kind of on this point. So anything could really happen just about within that realm. So running across a half goat Barriar secretary with horn-rimmed glasses and a bad attitude opened up a really fun bit of comedy, I think, for myself and for poor Kong, who unfortunately got his tail handed to him just a bit there. But comedy, I think, is probably one of my favorite ways of putting joy into your story. And as far as joy and reward, those are easy. I would love to hear some examples from players and game masters alike out there who possibly are seeing this or will see this, of the more extreme points of joy that you've seen come out in your games. What are some things that you've done to trigger that really irrepressible, bubbly joy in your games? If you have managed, like I said, this is probably one of the hardest um, to achieve. So yeah, I'd love to hear that. Join us on Discord. Hit us up on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, uh, smoke signal, letter writing across the sky, laser beams carving it into the moon. Whatever you want to do, it's fine. But before I get too off track, uh, the third form of this that I mentioned earlier is conflict. Conflict is another one that's not terribly difficult to get a rise out of your team or your players with, because well, everybody's kind of got in character now. They've always got their triggers that make them angry, and generally people will always let you know, whether you like it or not, what makes them angry. And this applies to characters as well as people. So your big bad evil guy, obvious easy choice. He should do something so heinous and so against the moral fiber of your party that they just dislike this guy. And that's an easy way to get. Steal something important from your party. Watch how angry they get. Hurt somebody as a game master in the fantasy realm, not for real. But it hurt one of the characters, hurt one of the NPCs that they care about, take down somebody's mount. We kind of have an in-game mascot with some of ours. A leftover from Maury Wickletongue was a gift given to the master, the rogue, of a donkey named Almond Milk. But and I don't think I would ever do this, but I have imagined the reaction that would come about from some of the players and characters. What would happen if Almond got hurt, or if Almond died in the narrative? What would happen? Like, what would the reaction be? This is the last remnant of their dear friend Maury Wickletongue. This is one of the final remnants of the world that was destroyed, that they barely escaped from. And this is a crux here. This is a horcrux of the party's soul, as it were, in this little donkey they're hiding away in this huge city of Sigil. And this is what I mean. And once again, if any of my players are listening, I'm not threatening to do this, don't worry. I'm not entirely cruel and inhuman. But this is just as an example what I'm talking about. It's easy to set your players off and to get that wrathful, angry response, by theft, by harm, by murder, by, manipulation, either. And honestly, that's probably one of the most powerful, is if you can twist the narrative in just such a way that the party themselves end up doing something horrible without realizing it, and then not only have to deal with the fallout from those actions, but have to make do with coming to terms with the moral obligation as dictated by who their character is. And this is a wonderful role-playing moment. If you get one of these in your game, it's a moment that really defines the character as who they are, what they stand for, what's important to them, because this is something that they struggle with. An easy example is a paladin who's tricked into doing something that goes against his code and loses that the paladinhood, and has to basically redeem himself before the eyes of whatever order he owes fealty to regain that status again. Or the religious characters are obviously very easy to do with that, but tricking a mage into casting a spell that harms something he cares about inadvertently may get him to change his school of focus. Or a rogue that while in a heist ends up hurting an innocent along the way, turns out he's a good aligned character and swears off thievery. And these are very almost generic examples, but no less powerful. And a lot of this, once again, I'm going to use that word, is organic. It will unfold within itself. Your players, your NPCs, your main characters in your story even are going to grow and evolve through situations and through um, experiences such as the ones that we've been discussing. These are the stories that your players are going to go on to tell, and they all kind of link up. You know, you have the poor paladin who is tricked by a silver-tongued rogue into killing the wrong person, who turns out to be innocent, loses his paladinhood, goes on a quest to redeem himself, angry at the world and those who tricked him and robbed him of his code, uses that anger to struggle in this horrible uphill battle, redeems himself at the end, and regains his paladinhood. And you get to experience the exuberance and joy of that struggle come to fruition, the redemption of a character arc, and your character, your player, will go on. And I guarantee that will be one of the stories that they nerd out with their friends next time they go to a gaming convention or have a session outside your own. It's going to be one of those tales that they tell, and that's one of the funnest things that you could really build with this. I think is those stories, those tales, those things that bring it all to life, and really, as I said at the very beginning of this, put the heart into it. Because, as I said, we've gone over the where and how to bring that to life. We've gone over the who and the how and how to bring that to life. And we've gone over the history and the stories and how to make that more realistic. But now we're breathing life into the spirit of the game with the emotional content, with the attachment, with the connection, not only with you and your character, or with you and your NPCs and your characters within the narrative, but also between the characters and between the characters and the external members of that story. And in doing so, I'd like to think that these bonds go further and create something really unique on a very real level, which, and I still stand by, is one of the more beautiful parts of the game. Now, before we get into our ongoing experiment with Silver Falls, I do want to just say one more time as a disclaimer, when you're dealing with emotional content as a player or a game master, please take a care, pay attention, read your players, read the people at your table, read your friends, and make sure you don't push things too far. Always respect what people could or could not be going through, what they could or could not understand, or what they could or could not be capable of processing. Keep an eye out for that, and always respect that boundary. If you're not sure, ask. And I would like to think that if you're a player or a game master, if you do have an issue, please say something. Pull somebody aside if you're embarrassed, but definitely say something. I don't think anybody out there wants to hurt anyone's feelings directly, and we're all friends here. So always have a care. Anyway, all that aside, let's dive back into Silver Falls, shall we? Now we've actually gotten into a little bit of this. I think what we've been talking about here, we're getting pretty far here. I mean, we've got history, we've got personality, we've got main characters, we've got socioeconomic stability and how that works, and we've also got conflict. Last time we got together, we talked about the Burnt Crows, the leader of the underground resistance, the Shawneesian holdouts, who are trying to regain some semblance of the life they had and lost at the hands of the Becklerite Empire. Um, Brianna Fane is the leader of that organization, um, and somebody who is not only involved in a sham marriage with a Becklerite woman to keep their cover, but uses a magic ring as a wedding ring that maintains a disguise, hiding the scars of the Shanakesian from the Becklerite settlement. But it has a side effect of draining 1 hit point a day, so it's got to be something that's recharged from time to time. So, Brianna Fane, I've kind of done some stats here, because I said I would next time we got together. Brianna Fane is a Shanakesian. I decided to go ahead with a level 3 Benevolent, level 3 Arcanist split class. We've got our basic stats here, as well as hit points and armor class. Brianna can't necessarily take a huge hit, but it's the 23 armor class there. But as you can see, Brianna's very intelligent, very charismatic, and very quick. So Brianna's got a good Brianna. Sorry, I'm mispronouncing the name I made up there. Brianna Fane is survivable and uses their skills very well, I think, in that regard. So, since our focus tonight has been kind of emotional content, we already know that Brianna Fane has an emotional reason to be here. We know that part of this is vengeance. This is anger from loss from the Shanakesian race, and even though it's been over 100 years since the blight happened, since this horrific tragedy befell her people, or his people. I don't think we ever determined gender. Could go either way. But this is one of the easier ones as far as an emotional reason, the base emotional reason. Now, we don't have a lot of history on Brianna Fane here, aside from the very basic racial history of the Shanakesian people being nearly wiped out through a horrible tragedy that befell them at the hands of the Becklerite people. We know that they're scattered. They live in little tiny clusters here and there and hiding. The whole race is scarred horribly from the power of the magic that brought the blight down. And all of these are very easy to use bullet points. But what we really need to determine is what's really driving Brianna Fane this far. Is it 100-year-old grudge, or is there something else in that? Is there some other reason, some other motivator there that our friend Fane here has used to stoke the coals deep down inside, to not only push back but to lead an element of subversive resistance against one of the larger empires in the known world of Cairn where we're playing. So, what really is driving our friend here? And of course, if any of you have any suggestions, I'd love to hear them for any of this, as always. Because, as I said, we have our big basic bullet point, but I think there's something deeper. Something that removed scruples from the situation, and actually probably a little bit of the questioning of the moral fiber too. So, a very good role-playing tool, obviously, within the realm of the game is alignment. Now, I don't generally enforce alignment too terribly harsh, because I think it is just a tool and should be used as such. But I think in this particular element, it allows you to kind of line up a path of behavior. So, just in case, and I'll do this quickly, if anyone out there isn't terribly familiar with the concept of alignment, any new players or whatever out there, obviously alignment is kind of your, well, the direction of your moral fiber, let's say. So the first half of it is law and neutrality or chaos, and as far as how you dictate your behavior in adherence with the concept of law and order, not necessarily law and order, but the concept of law and order. And I think Vienna in this case would probably be chaotic in that sense. Now you could just as easily say that they're maintaining a lawful stance with what they believe in. But I think in this particular case with the fake marriage and the position as a benevolent and using that to actively seed misinformation and potentially cause harm, we're going to have to stick with chaotic. But at the same time, I don't think Vienna is necessarily evil. So that's the next half would be good, neutral, or evil. And I don't think that they're evil per se. I don't think they actively hurt innocent people. They're fighting back for a cause, but there's a very gray line there that's been crossed, I would imagine, at some point in some level. So if I had to guess, I would probably go with just chaotic neutral. And that's a very easy one because it's kind of a fly by the seat of your pants, do what's best for the situation type alignment. So why is Vienna so angry is the question that keeps coming into my head. Beyond the obvious, what happened to our friend here to make them this way? Was it loss? Was it hurt? Disrespect? I mean, it could be any of these things. It could be a mixture of all of them. So, in this particular case, like I said, most of the Shonakisians live in isolation in small clusters. They hide. They don't get out much. They don't get to enjoy life. And considering this is a race of what was once the most beautiful and talented people on the planet who traveled all over sharing their creations with all the other cultures, that's a big change. So I'm going to go out on the limb and let's say that it's a mixture of isolation and repressed anger over the past. Now that's pretty simple, pretty easy. Say the isolation pushed our friend too far. They had something in their heart they needed to get out, weren't able to, and it just pushed them over the edge, pushed them right over the edge. So that's a decent enough motivator, I think. But I think if we leave Vienna there for now, let's explore the opposition to Vienna a little bit. Lilly and Tovar, you might remember, is the Burgomeister of our little burg here. Lillian's a Becklerite, just a base level 6 fighter, not necessarily a frontline fighter, definitely more of a leader than a fighter, but can still hold her own in a toe-to-toe. Not somebody to be lightly brushed off at any rate. Now, I mentioned earlier too that I didn't want Lillian to be two-dimensional. It's very easy to paint the Becklerite as they stand now as the easy villain. And I would like to thank Walgod in our current campaign, who's playing a Becklerite benevolent, a healer type character, for really pushing that stereotype to the side as he plays his character, Wilhelm. And I like to think that there's a lot of Becklerite people who are actively like this. They are decent people and part of an empire that made a really bad choice that echoed throughout generations. And I think Lillian deep down is this type of person. I think Lillian has a genuine care and concern for the people um, that she's supposed to take care of on her watch. As Burgomeister, it's her job to make sure that the needs of these people are met. And I think she takes that deeply to heart. Um, I always kind of pictured Lillian as a bit of a loner myself. Uh, Not married, no family, so to speak of, very work focused, very intent on what's before her. Probably one of those people that works late into the night, getting every little detail worked out on, the details of the trade deals of the day, and security concerns and this and that. And I think deep down that Lillian might even genuinely understand where Biana is coming from, because as we've discussed prior, Lillian and the council that run Silver Falls are very much aware of the underlying activities of the burnt crows in their area. But rather than raise the alarm and create a spook amongst their people, they're keeping it on the down low so as to A, not give them the extra power of that fear, and B, to not rile up the community that she cares about. So I think that she would probably rather pin down the leader, Biana in this case, of the Burnt Crows, bring them in and work out some sort of peaceable uh, stand down. At the same time, I don't think Lillian would compromise very easily, too, not when it came to the well being of her people. So Lillian would definitely be in a position of power, and I don't think that Lillian expects anything less. Um, so once again, I think we'll get an alignment for our dear Burgomeister here. Now, Lillian's very dedicated to upholding the letter of the law, obviously. She's the leader of her people. She upholds the standard of life, way of life of the Bachelorite people very highly. She maintains order of security. She maintains the order of the economic well-being and the agricultural well-being of her town and her people. So I'm definitely going to probably push for law on this one, lawful, because I think she does adhere to the law of the land, as it were. And genuinely, I would be inclined to go with a good alignment um, for Lily and myself, because I think deep down she's trying to do what's right. And granted, always in every aspect, but good and evil is subject to debate. It's always a matter of relevant perspective, let's say. But I think in this case, I'm going to go with just pure lawful good. And as I said, just because I think deep down Lillian is adherent to the law and believes in her heart that she is doing what is right. And I think there's even some part of her that is afraid of the potential for damage that the burnt crows could do. And if she's in any way aware of the lycanthrope Corky that is aiding the burnt crows out in the scrub wastes beyond the borders of Silver Falls, that's a scary thought. And obviously, anybody who spent any time beyond the borders of their town, and often within the borders of the town, in the realm of Cairn, where this takes place, due to the blight and the cataclysm that happens, everyone has had some encounter, most likely, with something unnatural or twisted and dangerous. So this is not an uncommon concept But the idea of one of the town's founders still being alive, still harboring a grudge, and infected with this horrible disease of lycanthropy, and who knows, potentially even twisted by the energies that permeate the land from the blight, still to this day, this could be something truly menacing out there in the dark. Not only just for her, but for her people, for their way of life. What if this thing went on a rampage through the town? You know, that the devastation, even if they managed to stop Corky, the devastation that he would leave in his wake would be catastrophic. And as I said with the lawful good alignment, that's not something that Lillian is going to allow. I don't think on any level. So we have a degree of passion starting to form. And I'd like to think that we're painting a picture of Lillian as not necessarily the bad guy, but as somebody who's in a position where they have to be, from the Shonakesian perspective at least. Now, if you're a Bechtelite and you have this person who's um, in a fake marriage with a woman, completely lying to her and maintaining a position as basically psychiatric help within the Order of the Benevolence for the townspeople, and using that to twist the people's minds and belief systems, and harboring a dangerous creature out in the scrubs, and smuggling and breaking the law, and all of Biana's motives aside, from the Becklerite perspective, that's a villain. That's a criminal, a fringe element that's a danger to their society. So we actually have these, and this is really one of the things I strive to create is not necessarily a defined good and evil, but more of a gray where good and evil takes on a matter of full perspective and is defined not necessarily but by a textbook good and evil, but more of a what side of the line are you on? And I've said it before, with rare exception, nobody wakes up one day and says, I'm going to be a supervillain. I mean, Yogg would definitely approve, but most people don't do that. The Dr. Evil villain is fun, and the trope is fun, but it gets tired very quickly if you rely on it too much. Whereas if you have a very strong gray area, it really, one can dream, indeed. But it really, it forces your players into a conundrum of their own personal moral obligations and how they're going to define the moral ambiguity that you're putting in front of them. And watching them scramble through something like that, if you've ever have or haven't, especially had the joy that comes with that. And I say that a little snarky, of course, as a game master, because you like to see your people struggle, not for any sadistic purpose, but because it means you're doing something right. Yeah, laughs and mustache twirling. Yes, I'm gonna have to regrow man just so I can do that. But yeah, it's important to give that the dilemma, the ambiguity that brings with it, because it's not an easy decision. You could spend an entire session just a party arguing how to proceed because they're all seeing different sides of it. And I think that's a little more true to life. Although, I mean, I love party cohesion. And the rare moments you get full party cohesion within a group are golden moments as a game master and a player, really. But it's very rare. And the internal strife that comes with a lack of cohesion really builds onto the overall narrative. If you go back and if you've ever finished a campaign, and I'll pull out the Stapleton campaign as an example. We actually ran that from start to finish. And if you really go back and look at it, the whole story from beginning to end, with the inclusion of the inter-party strifes and arguments that happen, with the bumbles and mistakes that happen, with the tragedies and the unsure moments and the ambiguous decisions that had to be made, and the separations, and all of the things that in the moment may seem very negative. From the perspective of the whole picture, when you go back and look at that story, that's what brings it to life. That's the emotional drama, the content that's going to make it more memorable for the players and for you. Because at the end of the day, and at the end of the campaign, that's what you're doing, is you're creating a story. And a lot of times, with the silliness, the interplayer silliness aside, if you were to edit all that out and just write that story from start to finish, it would be a really interesting story. Your campaign would be a really interesting story because of the organic narrative, because it is real people reacting in real time to real situations. And that's something that no standard author, I think, can ever get. Because if you sit down and write a story yourself, every aspect of that story is some part of you. Whereas in the role play narrative, it's not true. That's not true. Your players are driving the story. You're just creating a realm for them to do that, and putting things in their way to trigger directional choices. Whether that direction takes them down the narrative that you've actually written or away from it, the story is still being told. And these emotional moments are still driving it. And that by far and large is what you want to do. Drive your story home. Make your players, make yourself, make your viewers, whatever have you, feel it, because that's what's going to get them invested, and that's what's going to get you the big XP as a creator, as a content creator, and that's what we all want, right? At the end of the day, we want those experience points. Uh, I got an app on my phone. I give myself XP for everything I do during the day. Got up, showered, ate some breakfast. Woo! Look, I'm going to level soon. It's great. But that being said, I want to thank you all for joining me again here at Live from the Lily Pad. I really enjoy it. I enjoy the people that have pop in and interact with me. I hope to actually have a sit down with some of my players soon on one of these sessions and kind of go over thoughts and critiques and ideas for the current playtest for the Karen campaign that we're doing. I'd like to do that live so that you guys watching can really get a feel for that process and how it works. I think it'll be educational for me as well. I think we've come a long way and we've tweaked a good bit already, and I think it's still got a lot of potential for more change. So yeah, we'll advertise that when we do it, and hopefully you guys will tune in and check that out, because I think that one's going to be a real fun session for us. But yeah, as I said, I've really enjoyed this. Thank you for joining me once again. I am the Church Warden, aka the Wonka, coming to you live from the Lily Pad here at the epicenter of the multiverse on Homebrew Roleplay, and I will see you again next week. Same time, same channel, same face. Until then, enjoy.